All right, we are here today at Tyler State Park in Newtown, Pennsylvania. I had a lot of fun filming at Washington's Crossing, so I thought I might as well come here and show you what this park looks like. Now, we don't even have to leave the car for you to already sort of see the difference as to, the popularity of this place. This parking lot is quite full. And I want to point out, it is not the weekend. It is a Monday. Granted, it is a Monday in August and the kids are off school, but still, it's a Monday and it's already busier here than it was at Washington's Crossing on a Sunday. So that should tell you a little bit about how popular this place is. Now, as the sign indicates, we are in the boathouse area, which is actually the most popular part of the park. And if you thought I was kidding about the parking lot, take a look. Yeah. And fortunately, if you're worried about parking, there is about 10 other places to park in this park, including, actually very close to here. So, you just park one lot back and you walk like a quarter mile. It's no big deal. There's always plenty of spots for everyone here. And this here is the main area. This is the Neshaminy Creek, and the boathouse is actually right over there. Yeah, it may not be the Delaware River, but it's still a lovely little creek. Well, big creek, small river. And people like to come here, fish and play. As you can see, people just come here and chill. There's a little dam over there. So this is the park that my parents brought me to the most when I was a young kid, because it's actually quite close to where I grew up. And I was one of those young kids splashing around in the water at one point. Now, I think the rule is you're allowed to wade up to your ankles, but they've had significant problems with parents just letting their kids just swim in the water, which is not allowed, so they've had to hang up signs everywhere to warn everybody. So here is a dam, or maybe it's a weir, whatever it's called. You can see that it is it's a dangerous spot. I mean, right now I don't think the water is moving fast enough to really threaten anybody. But you can tell that if there was just a little bit of rain or a little bit of excess water coming over, it would turn dangerous. I mean, I've seen the water high enough here that you can barely tell it's here. It's just turns into sort of a bump on the way. And over here you can see there are boats that you can rent to paddle around on the water, because just upstream of the dam here, it makes a bit of a calm pond. And of course you have the rope making sure that nobody gets too close to this dam. As you might be able to tell, there are some kids that are definitely pushing it out there, but, I've seen much worse rule breaking. Yeah, you can see the water lazily making its way down. But if I have those videos still, I'll show you what it looks like when storm hits. Now, once again, we have some calm waters, but I've seen this going over the top before. One of the signs they had to throw up, they're very serious about it because it was quite a problem here. And you can see the remnants of storms that have happened here, because trees and stuff do get washed downstream. And one thing you'll notice at this park is horse shit. Literally. Yeah, there it is. You might see horses here. This really is a park for everyone. You'll have casual walkers, you'll have hikers, you'll have bike riders, and of course, you will have horse riders. Now, there's plenty of paths like this that you can just walk on that are paved, and there are also paths like this, which of course I prefer, where you just have a nice little nature walk. So yeah, we are going in here. And gosh, if I haven't said it enough, I really love how pretty this area is. I mean, I'm sure living out west is great with all the views and such, but look at the greenery here. Just look how green everything is. Of course, it is gray for like 6 months of the year between November and April, but the warm months, it's nice. And honestly, I was bad-mouthing Washington's Crossing for not removing their logs, and we have this bad boy right here. But I think stuff like this, they really do leave on purpose, and I can just step right over that. It's very, very easy. So here there are a mix of nature trails ranging from the widely traveled and the very popular to the unofficial and less widely traveled and everything in between. Of course, this being the one that points directly back at the boathouse, this is the most traveled path here, and it has a few branches, but it will lead us to some other areas that are less seen. So, I don't have a set plan for where I want to walk today. We're just going to sort of go out and wing it and see what we see. Of course, I've been pretty much every possible trail that you can go on in this park as we cross another log. See that? Oh well. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. And here is a little view of another creek. Don't know the name of this one. We are actually not in Newtown anymore. On the other side of the river, we are in, technically, Northampton Township. Yeah, because nothing is more interesting than talking about local Pennsylvania municipalities. Oh, that is a riveting discussion. Could bore you on that for hours. I'm not kidding. And although this part of the state is not really known for steep cliffs or big hills, it's not nothing. You still got stuff like this. And if you're knucklehead and try to climb up there, you're likely to get hurt. It can happen. And we actually have a very nice footbridge over here, which didn't exist when I was a teenager. But yeah, it's very nice. Of course, people have put their mark on there, put their graffiti, all their names, but yeah, I'm not going to add to it. And in fact, I think I want to stay on the side of the bridge that we are originally on, and we even have a little sign here. So yeah, this trail is only half a mile long because you can see we're already halfway through it. Quarter mile back to the boathouse, quarter mile on to the next paved trail. So we'll probably skip ahead to that. All right, and here we are a mere quarter mile later, and we're already coming out onto a paved path. Now this path is long and slowly curving, so you can absolutely just wear your regular sneakers and just have a nice walk here. But fortunately, we have a trail right next to the path that just continues the off-road experience. Well, I guess it's a road, but unpaved. And kind of missed the sign. I wonder if I can show you, because this has an amazing name, this trail. It's literally called the Hay Barn Grass Trail. Seems like it was named by an 8-year-old, doesn't it? It's like, what do you see on this trail? And the child just like looks around and he's like, hay, barn, grass. And the adults are just like, all right, sure, that's the name of the trail. We can't think of anything better, so we're just gonna call it the Hay Barn Grass Trail. Although, unlike the last trail, you can tell that this one is actually sometimes used by vehicles, or at least was at one point. I hate to try to drive on here with just like a regular sedan or anything. Oh, and of course, horses use this too. We will be seeing a lot of horse shit on this walk. Oh, that is some fresh horse shit. Some more down here. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that was laid today. I can smell that for sure. So there are actually like 2 or 3 stables in the area immediately around the park. And people come and ride their horses here. And I'm pretty sure at least some of those places you can, rent out horses and come here. They're only allowed on certain trails, but the network of trails for horses is actually pretty extensive here. You can walk on them too, as I am right now. They're not exclusively horse trails, but they are where you will find them. Now, unlike at Washington's Crossing, you can't actually ride your bike on these trails. They have a pretty strict policy of you keep your bike on the paved trails here. It's not always followed. I've sometimes seen people ride their bikes on these trails and, whatever, it's not a big deal. But I guess in a more high-volumed park such as this, where there's bound to be a lot more kids and such, they just want to sort of keep everyone on the paved trails. And there are actually a lot of paved trails in this park, and they're all great for biking. It's very hilly, so you have to be able to cope with a significant degree of hills. And I have a story about that later on that we'll get to when we get there. All right, now we've reached the end of the trail, and we're actually here at one of the other ways into the park. If you continue along this road, it actually turns into an actual road down there, heading towards Richboro. And if you go this way, there's actually a huge, long, straight hill that just goes right down, back towards the river, and back towards the boathouse indirectly. And as you might have noticed, there are a number of farm fields in here, and although we haven't passed by any yet, there are still inhabited houses in this park. So you might think that's pretty unusual for a park, and I will explain. There is a history behind why it is the way that it is. Before I do, we have the trail here. We have a speed limit and a stop sign, which shows you that vehicles do come in here. And also, if you look into the distance, you can see a couple water towers. Yeah, those are actually near the Newtown Township offices. Yeah, see, I told you. I know all about the local stuff here. But anyway, this whole area used to be owned by the Tyler family, hence the name. And they were sort of your rich, Gilded Age family who eventually wanted to do something nice and philanthropic. So when the last Tyler heiress died at an old age in the 60s, she willed that her entire property be turned into a state park. She gave it to the state of Pennsylvania. But she left a small portion of her property to Temple University, which is where the family was strongly connected. They might have gone there, I'm not sure, but they were connected with the university, so they gave a plot of the land to them. And so Temple actually opened a satellite campus there, which eventually evolved into Bucks County Community College, where nearly everyone I know, myself included, has taken at least one class, or perhaps got their associates, or even gone to some sort of like summer activity when they were kids. So it's a pretty big, well-attended school. So the community college is right up against the park, and you can actually walk to it from the park. And the rest of it has been turned into the state park. So, very interestingly, it's pretty much a slice of Bucks County from how this area used to look before all the commercialization, before all the suburbanization, and it's just a hint of the rural past that is maintained. So you'll still have houses that were on this land before it became a park, and people still live there, and occasionally you'll still see cars on these roads, and you'll have to get over for them and all that. And yeah, the farms are still working farms. It's very cool. It's not completely unique, but it's fairly unique. And this is actually one of the horse farms I was talking about. If you can look to the left here, you can see that there are some horses still moseying around. Now, straight is the path that leads into the farm, but to keep walking, you stay to the right, and this is the trail that goes to the rest of the park. But yeah. Very majestic animals, aren't they? Horses. I've never ridden on a horse before myself. When I was a young kid, I think I was on a pony once at a fair. It was sort of tethered to a thing and it went around in a circle with the other ponies, so it really doesn't fully count in my opinion. My sister, though, she was into riding horses when she was a kid. I think it's in no small part because of Lord of the Rings, because that's one thing that my sister got from my dad. He was sort of into sci-fi and fantasy, and I got the sci-fi side of things, and she's more got the fantasy side of things, although we both cross over here and there. But those Lord of the Rings movies came out when she would have been like 11 or 12, so it's a pretty formative time for her, so she enjoyed riding horses a lot in her preteen and teenage years. It might be one of those things that would be fun to try someday. It's just because it's like it's important to our history as a species, riding horses, Yeah, take a look. A reminder, we are still in Lower Bucks County. We are not that far at all from Levittown and from Mooresville and Trenton and other highly populated places. I really do think, even now, that farmers make up the soul of a nation. The people who live on the land, who work the land, who raise the crops. Historically, they've always been the bedrock of a people. It's like the town where the merchants are and everything else. They're kind of just, they've always been a little bit disconnected, and the bigger the settlement, the bigger the disconnect. And once you get into big cities, you get, urbanites, which are pretty much a different species of human at this point. Which is strange because, we've had a development over the last several generations where we've went from a mostly rural population across the Western world to being a mostly urban population. I mean, at this point, it's probably like 90%. And by urban, I don't just mean, people who live in New York and Philly. It's just like anyone who lives in a built-up area, including like a suburb. And of course, I am among that population. I didn't grow up in a rural area. I didn't grow up in a farm. I mean, I grew up close to here, where I am right now, but don't let this fool you. This area is very suburban. It's fairly upscale. You know, it's quite disconnected from the rural heritage that it used to have. There are signs of it everywhere, but just the daily lives of people here are very disconnected from that. But you go back just a couple generations. I mean, my grandfather, my father's father, grew up on a farm in central Illinois. You know, he and his family were quite poor. His wife, my grandmother, she grew up on a farm in Missouri. She was the 7th of 13 children. They were extremely poor. Like the stories that I would hear when I was a kid. And they didn't talk about it too often. But it's like things you couldn't believe coming from a modern standpoint. And think about that. One of 13 kids. She was right in the middle, which means there were 6 siblings before her. And there were 6 siblings after her. That is pretty extraordinary. Let's veer off the path. We're going on one of the paths marked for horses, which of course people can also walk on. But anyway, yeah, these things are not that far in the past for like almost all of us. If you're my age, born in the 1980s, it's very likely your grandparents were born in the 1920s or 30s. And even at that point, we were a significantly more rural nation. Even my father's generation, he grew up in a small town, and he told me stories of like he would wake up, he'd be 9 years old, he'd wake up at 4 in the morning, and his breath would hang over him because it was frozen in the house. So being the oldest of 5, he would get up, he would go downstairs into the basement and shovel coal into the fireplace so that when his parents woke up, it would actually be somewhat warm for them. Now I say fireplace, it was actually a furnace, but literally put coal into the furnace to warm up the house. Then his father would get up, go off to his, grueling blue-collar job. He had many, he was a mechanic and did several other things. Very much a work with your hands kind of person. And then his mother would get up and make breakfast for all the kids. And then once my father was done doing all that, he would go do his paper route, make a few bucks doing that, delivering papers. And then he'd go to school, and then after school, he'd play sports. He'd do basketball, baseball, all that stuff. So yeah, a very different life than what I had, and it's quite remarkable just to think of just how much has changed in such a short time. All right, and here we have the hill with the story. Now, we're going back in time here 27 years to when I was only 11 years old. I was riding my bike in this park with my parents, and we decided to come down this way. Now, I don't know if the camera fully impresses on you how steep this is. And, it's not like going down a cliff steep, but if you're on 2 wheels, you feel it. You accelerate quite quickly. So what happened was I tried to stop the bike because I felt I was going way too fast. And it was one of those bikes where you had to sort of pedal backwards to slow down. And for whatever reason, I couldn't get the bike to slow down enough. So I kept going faster and faster as I went down this hill until I lost control, went side to side, just like whoop, 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 and then bam, on the ground. Tore up my knee, my arm, side of my cheek a little bit. I had little pebbles in my mouth that like went through my cheek. It was pretty brutal. So had to hobble my way back. Yeah, that actually made me afraid of getting onto my bike for an entire year. But fortunately, when I got over it, I became a an avid bike rider once again, and well into my teens and 20s, it was something I love to do. And it's something I should get back into now. I've had the same bike for 24 years. I don't know the condition it's in, and unfortunately my father is no longer here to help me fix it if things are going wrong. The most I've ever been able to do in terms of bike maintenance is I've put the chain back on when it's come off, and that is about the pinnacle of my achievement to when it comes to anything mechanical, like at all. I can also ride my father's bike because, well, you know, he can't. So I guess it's mine now, and maybe I'll give that a whirl and see how that goes. I think that could be a lot of fun because I used to go very far on bikes, and maybe I'll talk about my biking adventures at some other point. And down at the bottom of the hill, the paved trail actually ends. Over here, I believe, is a hostel, or at least it used to be. It's very old. I'm not even sure if this building is still inhabited anymore. So, yeah, it's mysterious. But if we go to the right, as the sign indicates, we go towards the covered bridge. So that's going to be very neat to see. And here we are coming up to the bridge. Now this bridge is actually not the original covered bridge that was here. The original bridge, built in the 19th century, was actually destroyed by arson in the early 90s, and it was rebuilt painstakingly. And I remember when we first moved here, we saw it under construction, and it was built in the exact same way as the original. There is here some significant amount of information, so if you ever want to come here and read it, there it is. And here's the bridge. It's hard to find a view that isn't obscured by trees. You got fishers happily fishing, and I will go in it. So yeah, this bridge is a pretty impressive feat, because even though it's only about 27 years old, it was built in the exact way as the original, even down to the wooden nails. So I can just take you around. Just enjoy the craftsmanship here. This is the kind of project that I, even as a person who is not handy whatsoever, would have actually loved to work on. Just because, you know, nailing hammers and nailing nails with the hammer, I mean, I could probably do that. I love these little windows here. Where are those fishers? There they are. Now let's go to the other side. Pretty, isn't it? And now we emerge onto the Newtown side of the bridge. Yeah, you can tell just how solid this is. Like, I have no doubt that if needed be, a truck of significant size could probably roll across this bridge and be completely fine. Trying to grow some trees here, and of course there's a million deer in this area, so gotta have these nets up to keep them from being eaten. Here is a significantly less obstructed view of the bridge. That log up there is wild. The water might have been that high at some point. I don't think any point this year, but there have been times. This creek does tend to run very, very high at times. So I don't doubt the water has reached the level of the bridge before. And here's a view from the other side. Covered bridges are actually a symbol of this area. You'll see them featured quite a lot on various postcards and memorabilia from people trying to, to sort of forget that Bucks County is a suburban county filled with 600,000 people. They like to harken back to the rural past, where this was a very rural place, and pretty much the entire county looked more or less like what you're seeing today, which is why I'm very grateful for this park, because that is preserved. No matter what happens to everything else, you can still get a taste of that past. Of course, the reason that covered bridges exist is because horses kind of get freaked out when you're going over water, especially when you're high up. So if you cover a bridge in this way, the horse doesn't feel so affected by the height or the water, and they'll just calmly walk along. And back to what I was saying about my grandparents and my father, there is a picture of them that I just love, and if I can find it, I'll put it up on the screen. Now, this picture was taken in the mid-50s, judging by the ages of the people involved. And this was my grandparents and my father and his brother. Now, there would go on to be 5 of them in the family, but at this point, there were only the 2. And I just love this picture. To me, this picture is America. This is what we were, what we still are, and could be. You look into the faces of my grandparents, and they are serious, competent people. Like, you look at these people, and you just know that they know what they're doing. They know who they are. They don't have any weird questions about what their role is in the world, or what they're doing, or any of the other bullshit that people like me and a lot of you probably agonize themselves over. They know who they are, they know what to do, and they know how to live their lives. And they would end up raising 5 children and building a life for themselves. They weren't rich, they weren't famous, they were just normal people doing normal people things. And there is something very noble about that. So yeah, it is one of my favorite pictures. And thinking about that makes me feel like I've really fallen short. And of course, I can blame a lot of it on living in a fallen civilization and a fallen society that has gone so far downhill since the time that picture was taken 70 years ago. But I can't blame it entirely on that. That would be sort of neglecting my own personal responsibility in what has happened, and stuff like that. If you have that in your own families, if you have pictures of your grandparents or your parents or great-grandparents, it's something to draw motivation from, because it's like, well, they did everything that they could so that their children and grandchildren would have a better life. And by material standards, at least, I had a much better upbringing than they did. They grew up poor. I grew up well into the middle class, and I never had to worry about food or where I was going to live. I mean, that might be changing now as an adult, but, as a child, I never had to worry about such things. And it really makes me think about the progression of generations and how the parents give so much to the kid. They work so hard for so many years to raise the children, and there's really nothing that they ask for in return, or at least that's how it should be. And you might think, well, is that not unfair? And my response to that is no, because you don't pay them back, you pay it forward. Once your parents have given everything that they can to you and your own development, you then have your own family, and you pay all that sacrifice, all that effort forward. Because we are not truly individuals out here on our own. We are just the latest links in a chain that go all the way back through our ancestors and continue on through our descendants. And this is why I find the whole modern phenomenon of not wanting to have kids, not wanting to have a family, I find that to be not just selfish, but rather abhorrent. You know, I told you I wasn't going to talk about contemporary politics, but, you know, J.D. Vance, when he says stuff like that, maybe not in those terms, but he's right. I'm not talking about people who can't have kids for whatever reason. I'm talking about people who are physically, financially, and socially capable of it and choose not to. Because you are just free riding off of all the sacrifice and all the effort and all the work of the generations before you, and you are not doing the work to pass it on to the next generation. You are just squandering it by basically turning your own life into this sort of self-worship kind of thing. And it's really disgusting. And I think that people should be shamed for that. And I think the fact that people are not shamed says a lot about where we are. And you can have worries about, well, I don't think I'm going to be capable of providing a good life for my kids because of the cost of living and such, and how dangerous the world has gotten and how precarious things are. Well, what I'd say to that is, if you do that, you're letting them win. You're letting the bastards win. And also, you think that what you grew up with in the 80s or 90s or 2000s or whenever you grew up with, the better life that you had, you feel that that is the standard, and that if you can at least do that for your children, then you're doing them a disservice. But remember what I was talking about before. It was only 2 or 3 generations ago that you'd have like a family of 12 kids in just like a tiny house, like a 3 or 4 room house. You go back a few more generations before that, people didn't even have like floors. You know, they had like dirt floors and straw floors. And yet, they did it. They did their best. Before modern medicine, like, most of those kids wouldn't even grow up. A lot of them would die young, but they still did it. And they built great civilizations. And they built us. They were the ones who created us. So I know if I'm going to be fortunate enough to get married and have kids myself, I'm not going to be able to raise them in the same way that I was raised. But if I was able to, if I could find a woman who was willing to have a large family and not worry so much about the kids not having the finer things in life, I would go and do that. I would have 12 kids. I'd be, you know, I'm 38 already, so I'd be well into my 50s at this point at minimum. But I'd do it. And we'd have 2 rooms for the kids. One for all the boys, one for all the girls. Bunk beds. They might be crammed up together, but it's something. And you learn to live with it. You get really, really good at resolving conflicts in that way. And the thing is, if you have like a whole bunch of kids, once the older kids get to be, you know, a little bit older, I'm not even talking like teenagers, like when they're like 8 or 9 years old, they can start to help out with the younger kids and, you know, help you with them. And ideally, if we lived in a healthy society, we'd all have, you know, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, grandparents, cousins all around to help too. And we would help them with their kids, and we would all sort of be around each other and helping to raise each other. But if you don't have that, then you're just going to have to do the best you can with stuff. You know, your older kids might be jealous of your younger kids rather of their contemporaries, of their friends, when it's like, well, my friend gets to run off and do all these things. I have to be at home and watch my little brothers and sisters. But yeah, that's just life, you know. Sometimes that's what you have to do. And they might be grumpy about it at the time, but ultimately what they gain is going to be much better than what little Timmy, the single child of a middle-aged, middle-class couple who goes to Disney World and, you know, all that. What your kid who grows up looking after his younger siblings in a 3-room house, what he gains is going to be much better. Because I've known the products of both houses. I know plenty of kids who grew up in middle-class houses. Their parents worked in like pharmaceuticals or, you know, some other high-paying field, and they had everything they wanted. You know, they had fancy trips. They had nice cars, like their parents would buy them an Audi when they were 16 or something like that. And you fast forward, and so many of these guys are miserable. They might have good jobs themselves, they might not. They just, you know, they might date for a little bit and then, you know, break it up, and they're just living on their own and just unhappy, just miserable people. You know, confused about themselves, confused about life, just no feeling of connection to anything. And, you know, a lot of these people are turning to alcohol. That's a big problem with my generation. A lot of alcohol abuse. A lot of them have become potheads, you know, all these, just whatever it takes. Porn addiction, that's another big one. And they just numb the pain away. On the other hand, I know many people who grew up in very rough situations where their parents didn't have much money and they didn't get to do much. You know, you'll see kids like, oh, I never left the state I was born in until I was in college. And you'll hear stories like that. I never was on a plane until, you know, my first business trip in my 20s or whatever. And you'll hear stories like that. And most of those kids, of course, there are still people from that background who, you know, have died in drunk driving accidents and stuff. And I still know plenty of people like that. But by and large, the people who grew up in that circumstance, they have done so much better. They're just harder working. They have higher value in family, in a mate, in children. And a lot of them, funnily enough, turn into the kind of people who produce these middle-class weenies that I was talking about in the last segment here. So it's kind of just a funny cycle of how that goes. But yeah, the point is, we need children. If we don't have children, we don't have a future. You know, the children are the future. And that's important to remember. And yeah, like I say, don't wait until everything is perfect. Don't wait for the perfect mate. Just find somebody who shares your values and that you can get along with, basically. If you can get along with them and you have the same values, then everything else will work itself out with a little effort. Seriously, you don't need to find your soulmate or anything like that. As long as your kids have a roof over their heads and a full belly when they go to sleep, you don't need anything else. You don't need a subscription to like all these different Netflix and things. You don't need to go to Disney World at all, let alone every year. You don't need expensive clothes. You don't need any of that. Nothing of that is important. And to the extent that you can still get that, just tell your kids to try to befriend like a rich kid. That sounds cynical, but very often you will have a situation where a rich family will have a son or daughter who will befriend somebody who's a bit poorer and, invite him on stuff. So that's a way that your kid can still get to do a lot of these things. But in order to do that, your kid has to have a good character, basically. Be a likable enough person that people are going to want to befriend them. And that's another thing that's kind of become a problem, is just people are just sociopathic these days. Just the way that our system is set up is like being a psychopath makes you rich, but being a sociopath gets you by, basically. You can be comfortably middle class just by following sociopathic tendencies. So, yeah, it's really upsetting. If you're a real one, it's a little bit harder. But then again, you stand out. And I think as long as you're self-aware and don't let people take advantage of you, you can still be a real one, and people will be attracted to you. They'll be curious about you, and you'll have people interested in you, not just romantically, but just like as friends or as somebody they want to know, in a way that if you were phony baloney Mr. Sociopath, that people don't care. I mean, oh, look at this guy. He makes $100,000 a year and he drives a BMW, and then you date him for a bit and find out, oh, he's actually just like, you know, just kind of one of these dweebs. And then you break up with him. And then you do the same thing with 6 other guys who are all dweebs the same way. You know, that's kind of just how things go. And I'm not even going to talk about the dating scene, because it is a mess, and not just for men, but for women too. And I believe I am in the wrong spot. Yeah, if this was a path, it is not a path anymore. I am going to turn around and try to find a different path. All right, this is better. Now, as you can see by where we are, we're quite a bit removed from the path at the beginning of the video, which was a very commonly tread path here. This is a little bit less common. It's one of those more unofficial paths. So at this park you get both, and you have to know where to go, and you'll find yourself in places like this. And you know, don't be surprised if you get a little bit cut on your leg from brambles and crap. It's just a consequence of coming here. I mean, I have a pretty high tolerance for that kind of thing. I really don't mind. And yeah, they say to wear long pants on walks like this. I don't wear long pants. I don't give a shit. I just walk. My legs are made of hardened leather by this point. I don't have any problems tromping through this. And at Tyler, you're never more than a short distance away from a paved trail anyway. So if you at any point feel lost or like you don't want to do it anymore, you can just make your way over to one of them, which, you know, in some areas is easier said than done. Like, try tramping through this crap, but hey, I still dig it. We're here near the Neshaminy Creek again, and you really can't make out much here, but it does go up a couple 100 feet up there, and somewhere behind these trees is actually the Tyler Mansion. If it was winter and these trees were bare, we'd probably actually be able to see it a little bit. And here we're starting to get a little bit closer to the boathouse, where you can see the water is starting to pool up a bit. And if we get close enough here, I don't think that's quite to the weir over there, but we're definitely getting closer. And you might just be able to make out people paddling. There they are. I see them. Yeah, one of these days I gotta get a better, more advanced phone with a better camera. That'll be on my list of things to do once I've saved up a little bit of money. Honestly, I don't know what kind of phone to get. I am very ignorant in the world of smartphones. You want to know something true? I didn't get my first smartphone until 2017, which, yeah, is anywhere from 4 to 8 years after most people I knew had one. So, yeah, I was slow to get on the thing. And I've always gotten phones through my parents' family plan, and they're always like really old phones. So the phone I have in my hand is probably a good 6 or 7 years old minimum. And of course, in the world of phones, that's fairly old. And I mean, you're probably looking at the quality of the camera saying no shit, but I mean, hell, you remember what my channel looked like in 2010. If you don't, you can just look at it now because I still have plenty of videos up from that time. So even this is a huge step up from those videos. Remember the flip? That was the first thing I used to record vlog type things. And at the time it was great. It was wonderful. But looking back on it was very primitive. I mean, something like this, the phone I'm holding in my hand, would have blown my mind at the time of how clear this looks compared to what we were seeing back then. Distracted because I hear some quite vigorous paddling sounds over there. That is fun. That is actually another thing that's on my list to get once I've saved up some money, is to get a kayak. Because I love being on the water. You already know I love hiking. I love riding my bike. I love driving around. I even like riding on trains and stuff. So it's like I pretty much enjoy every form of transportation there is. And I love being on the water too, as I've learned through my boat friend. So I think the perfect way to put that all together would be to get a kayak or something that I can just bring to the water and just paddle myself around. It's also a great workout for the upper body too, because as it stands, my legs are in great shape from all the walks I've been doing, but my arms are kind of lacking, and my core is quite abysmal. Speaking of phones, that last clip was cut off because I reached the size limit, and I had to go and delete every video that was recorded earlier than today, which wasn't that many, so I actually have to be very judicious about how I use the last minutes of this phone. So yeah, it can't hold all that much too. That's another problem. So like once you reach like an hour of video, that's like all the space you get. But I want to show you that we are indeed back at the boathouse, at least across the river. And you can see that's the dock where you push off from. And here is the pool-like portion of the creek. And over there is the bridge and the popular area. It's very nice. And this path, where we are tromping through the woods, suddenly opens up, and you find yourself back in, well, not here, but right over there is the main path. So this path kind of disappears in here. Look at that. This is what I got to walk through. But none of these are prickly, so it's not that bad. But yeah, we are back within civilized reaches. Or we will be very soon. Here is a look at the boathouse from right across the river. And if we look up the river a little bit, we can see the boaters. And here we are at the main area. Everyone's having a great time here. And here we are actually at the boathouse. This is also where the bathrooms are. So it's a very popular spot to go, especially if you're me. There is where you rent the boats from. There's some of the boats you can rent. Alright, we're back here at the parking lot. I'm a little sad that the space is filling up on this phone, because there is still plenty at this park to show you. We've only really explored maybe like a third or a quarter of the area of the park here. For instance, over here is where you can actually walk up to the college and to Tyler Mansion. So we're gonna have to make that a part 2. Yeah, I definitely think I'll come back here at some point and make a part 2 showing you some of the other stuff in this park in the areas that we didn't visit. For example, did you know that there is a frisbee disc course at this park? Yeah, it's very fun. It's been many years since I've actually thrown a disc there, and I don't claim to be that good at it, but it's a lot of fun. So I'll at least want to come back and show you that, and then maybe we'll walk over to the college and I'll show you some of that. So consider that for a future video. We'll be back. Alright, we're back in the car and we're about to head out. So yeah, that was a very fun time. This was, as I said, the park that I was at the most often when I was a kid. And yeah, that's the second park video that I've done. If you're enjoying these, I will keep making them. So we'll pick somewhere else to go next, and I'll see you all very soon.